Well, I'll get us ready.
Sounds good.
Thank you and welcome to another Sunday Superversive live stream. I am your host, Benjamin Wheeler, and I am here with my co host, Anthony Marchetta. And we are joined today by Pastor Clegguart Mitchell, who is here to talk to us about a mission trip he's taking to the Congo, as well as just some of the things that are going on. We focus a lot here on, writing and art and, you know, ideas that aren't exactly practical for people who might have trouble feeding themselves. But I do I did want a chance to share something my church is doing, as well as just sort of show that hey, more things than people realize are still going on, and God's work is still being done even in these trying times.
hmm This is the Superversive live stream equivalent of a very special episode.
Oh no,
Right.
Anthony, don't say it.
No pressure.
Take us away, sir.
So, uh, yeah, I'm glad to be able to join you guys and visit a little bit. A couple of years ago, I led a team from our church, a large group of people down to South America, down to Ecuador, and while on that trip, we kind of enjoyed, not kind of, we enjoyed a long 2 week trip where it felt like we crammed about 4 different mission trips into one, and we really experienced a level of unity among a bunch of Christians that feels at times rare. And on the heels of it, that group said we need to really pray that God would open doors and do things that are beyond our ability. And within 2 months of our return, a new family came to our church, and as we got to know them, it was actually a family that had come here to the U.S. from the Democratic Republic of Congo. In fact, there's actually a movie that was made that features this man as a refugee from the DRC, and he didn't tell us that up front. In fact, I found it out later, but not that he was concealing anything, but he just didn't want that to be sort of the lead story. He just wanted to get to know us and us to get to know him and his family, and that's where it all began. And now that has taken on a life of its own. We call it Grace for the Heart of Africa. It's a church planting, pastor training. There's a lot of pieces and parts of it. We're working with between, I think it's 3,000 and 4,000 orphans. There's probably an additional 3,000 to 5,000 women of every age that have been abused, and most of them have been raped. Just through the raiders, the bands of guys that come through at different times and wipe out these villages and things. And so we're actually working with them to provide some care, and yeah, trying to plant churches and bring a little stability, something that will feed the soul and feed the body. And we've watched God do some incredible things. So now, look, I can tell stories all day long, and what would you like to know?
Well, what's your favorite story? We want to see, what goes on through your eyes, through your opinions, and sort of see how you view God working in this place. Because we don't really get to see those stories if
Sure.
the devil and all those have anything to do with it.
Right. Well, I will tell you that I come from a place where I tend to be very protective of the local church. As a pastor, the scriptures call the pastor, he's to be like a shepherd. The two main things that a shepherd would do is protect the sheep and feed the sheep. And with that strong sense in my own heart, even when Justin the young man I mentioned started coming to our church, I was super skeptical. I was like, "Come on, this can't be what it appears to be on the surface." And I ended up going over there in 2019, and some of the pictures are from that trip. And in a strange way, to quote Harrison Ford from Star Wars, it's all true. It's just true. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of women. I met a young lady. We went to one of the villages, and we were invited to this home. And the young lady, she was either 16 or 17 years old, and she was embarrassed to have us in her mud hut because she didn't have furniture. She went and borrowed a couple of little wooden plank boards, benches, I guess, and set them up for us to have something to sit on, and she sat on the ground and felt like she was being blessed because we entered her home, while feeling completely ashamed that she didn't have anything to offer. And I sat there looking at this young lady, and we were kind of interacting. She answered our questions, and finally it struck me, and I just asked, I said, "How old are you?" And I believe at the time she was either just turning 17 or just turned 17. And I'm realizing she was the same age as one of my daughters. And as she was relating her story to us, when she was 12 years old, she was with her mother down at the little stream, and had kind of gotten separated in all the tall switchgrass. And 3 men found her at 12 years old, and those 3 men raped her. And she became infected with HIV when they raped her. And that story I heard repeated over and over and over among some of the women in the area. They've just been raped multiple times, and some gang raped, many left with disease or impregnated, and that's part of the reason why there are so many orphans scattered out. I mean, there are just kids everywhere. We got to one village, and I was told there was this big sort of structure that looked like a really poor quality pole barn, only it was mud walls and wood holding things in place. It was sizable, and we went in to look around because we were going to be feeding around, I think, 1,500 to 2,000 orphans, something like that, later that day. And we're looking around, and this little baby, not quite big enough to walk, crawled in through one of the open areas, and we're looking around, and there is nobody anywhere. This little one, we don't know where it came from, we don't know where it belongs, and it's just everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. Eventually, they gathered everybody, so this whole facility became filled, and we set up a fire and baked more beans and cooked more rice in these giant vats like I'd never seen before, and started handing out plates of food, and these kids just scrambled because they were so hungry. They don't get meals maybe 2 or 3 times a week at the most. And so yeah, I mean, it was, and we, village after village after village, that's what we ran into. We spoke to the children, we spoke to the women. We had separate times where we wanted to just talk to them and share the gospel with them and share the hope that we have in Christ with them. There was one incident where we were at a church, and there was a lot of people there. It seemed like the whole village turned out. I think the whole village turned out everywhere we went. But I spoke, and we gave out some shoes and some clothes, and I went outside, and the kids just mobbed all around. They want to touch to see if the whiteness of my skin will wipe off. And I found some shade and a bottle of water, and I heard a noise, and around the corner was this little girl. It didn't look like a girl. I mean, I don't even know how to describe just this little child that looked literally like skin and bones. This one of the pictures that's hanging on my wall in my study at the church. I believe you have it in your slideshow, and I found out her name was Alice. And there's so many kids like that, and Alice stole my heart. I refused to leave that village until I knew that she was going to get some direct care, because it was obvious that she had not eaten in a really long time. And so that's part of it. I can say that with Alice, I received pictures 6 or 7 months ago. She has kind of filled out a little bit. She's not quite skin and bones anymore, and she's getting some care. She was going to school, and that's all directly related to the love and support of our church family and the Grace for the Heart of Africa ministry. But the reality is, this ministry is not about getting these villages or these areas to be dependent on us, or to think that we're going in there to tell them how to do stuff. To the contrary, our desire is to encourage leadership in the villages, and in particular church leaders. We're working with men who are interested in serving in a pastoral type of a role, and so we're trying to actually start churches in these villages where our primary link is through a godly man who wants to share the scriptures, get Bibles into the hands of the people, and just be there as an under shepherd to the great shepherd. And so a big piece of what we're doing, and what we're doing again here these next few weeks, is providing pastor conferences. So pastors and their wives will come, and we'll spend hours every day walking them through a book of the Bible, or dealing with certain subject matter from the scriptures, just trying to help them to understand a proper way to read the Bible in its context and let God speak, not using it like a magic 8-ball where you shake it and come up with whatever you want, but you let God say what he wants. And
I think you said something like they were preaching from dreams and visions, but still, were pastors,
right.
or claimed the
Right.
title. And that stuck with me.
Yeah, there's a heavy influence of what we would here in the U.S. call charismatic influence, which is a lot of emotions and dreams and experiences, and not all those things are wrong or bad, but they are not the authority. And anytime those kind of things go contrary to the Word of God, they're wrong and the Bible's right. And so in their case, very little or no training, you become, the tendency is to become very, very subjective about what you're talking about and what you're sharing. And the reality is, in a lot of Africa, I know very, very sound pastors that are on the continent of Africa that have expressed in the past how the old, what we used to think of as the local witch doctors, which there are some of those, but the modern equivalent are some of these people who claim to be pastors representing God, speaking for God, and they're really nothing but a repackaged version of the witch doctor. Evangelical terminology. Like, we don't have any of that in the U.S., but that's sarcasm, by the way.
Well, of course.
So we're kind of dealing with that. At the beginning of 2020, we had a situation where a few of the men that we were working with really kind of proved to be charlatans, and they were a part of that camp and just trying to take advantage. And as soon as we became aware of it, we took a strong stand and dismissed them from our service, and took some other actions that I probably really can't talk about. But there was a small window of time where we were actually facing the idea of do we pull the plug on this because of what had occurred. And there are some very, very godly men in our church here in South County, and in visiting with them, they were in agreement that we should not act in haste. We should pray, and remain vigilant, demonstrate integrity, and see what God does with it. And honestly, the net result is way beyond what we could have ever dreamed. We have what I think is a pretty strong core group of men on the ground in the Congo, and they are eager to learn and to grow. And in 2020, when everything was going on, I mean, I know it's a global pandemic, but when things started to shut down here a year ago in March, our church had already been live streaming services, kind of poorly, but we were able to pivot very quickly and sort of up our game faster than a lot of churches that didn't want to have anything to do with the internet. And in doing that, one of the things that we learned over the course of the last year is that some of our guys in the Congo are actually using our church live stream as part of their training material for ongoing work with the pastors that we're working with over there. So there's a lot of Sundays when some of the extra viewers are actually some of the English-speaking pastors. They're taking notes and sharing those things with the other men, and so that's actually been another unexpected way that God has worked over the course of the last year in all of this. So I will say there was a time when I was over there last time that we met in this village. We were kind of out in the open, had sort of a makeshift roof to block the sun, and there were probably 400 or 500 people, and Brother Sam and Justin and I took turns speaking, and at the end we only had 50 Bibles to give out, and as soon as we say we have Bibles, everybody's on their feet and just crowding, pleading, weeping, please can I have a Bible, please can I have a Bible. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. And this was actually the first village we were giving out Bibles, and I was overwhelmed. I had to step aside and go get out of view of everybody as much as I could a couple of times because I was just crushed. They are so desirous to have a Bible, and we only had 50 to give them, and we had to pick who was going to get them. And as we were handing some out, there was a group of about a dozen pastors that were there with us who had traveled in from different places, and they were watching us giving out Bibles, and they're holding these tattered Bibles that are being barely held together, and you know I finally guess it was 10. There was 10 pastors, because I turned around and I told Justin, I said, I want 10 Bibles, give me 10 Bibles. And he said, we don't have them for the pastors here. And I said, I want 10 Bibles. And he smiled and gave me the Bibles. And I went over and I just pulled those men aside and gave each one of them a Bible, and then had about 15, 20 minutes with them. And I just exhorted them, brother to brother, their responsibility to pursue the Lord and the truth of the Scripture in order to feed the sheep well. I mean, that's the goal, to be able to share the Word of God in a way that feeds the soul the way that it's intended to do so. And it was very, very moving, because the men, they just wept in receiving the Bible and receiving the challenge that I gave them that day. Probably the neat thing about it is we had a security detail. We usually have, so the leadership there, like local government leadership there, supports what we're doing. And like when I was there before, they issued 4 what we would essentially think of as police officers or paramilitary security detail that went with me everywhere I went. I couldn't go off and use the bathroom without one of them coming and standing outside the door and all that. And they were really a great group of guys. They weren't really Christians or anything, and so they really didn't know what to do with us. But the captain of that group was actually standing there listening to everything I was telling those pastors. And I really believe God did some neat things in that man's heart that day. And by the end of my trip that time, he hugged me and thanked me for coming and hoped I would come back, and appreciated what we were trying to do and build these people up and help them to think through, how can they maybe take what they have and use it, and I don't know, that was really a touching thing. So one of the piece I will give you, this last October I was supposed to go back again, and I canceled my trip because our church building had been struck by lightning and caught fire, and we're still COVID stuff around here in the county and all this, and so I canceled my trip because I felt like my role as a shepherd needed to be here with the people in South County. I'm glad that I did that, even though it was hard. But Sam is one of the elders here in our church. Justin is the young man who was a refugee 12, 13 years ago, 14 years ago. He shortly after coming to the U.S. applied and received, he is an American citizen now. His wife is now a citizen here. He went to college here in St. Louis, really has done well. And his name's Justin Kiminierwa. Mm-hmm. And so he's kind of the lead for this ministry here in the church. They are members of our church now. And so Sam and Justin went back in October, even though I couldn't go. And they spent one of their weeks doing the pastoral conference, as I mentioned, and the week was quite literally spent on just talking about what reconciliation means. Reconciliation among people groups, among the tribes, among people of different, we think of classes or whatever, but also the between men and women, between adults and children, and of course, and primarily the goal was to really try and explain what salvation is, being reconciliation between sinful man and holy God. And that whole week, the men were engaged in this teaching with these men. And what they didn't realize during the week is that there were some extra people in the crowd that was there. And at the end of the week, these extra people came to Justin, and he found out that this was basically what we would think of like a mayor or a governor over the city of Uvira. And that's a city of between 300,000 and 400,000 people. So it's very comparable to the size of the city of St. Louis. And he was so impressed with what they were teaching and what they were doing that he's like, look, I want you to come back, but I want you to bring this teaching to Uvira. This is good, and our people need this. And so basically he was offering some kind of sporting complex and saying that they were going to invite the entire city. And so Sam and Justin came back to St. Louis, and they're telling me about this, blown away, can't believe God is doing this. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I can't believe God is doing this. A government official inviting us to come, and here again, I started becoming very skeptical.
Yes.
And I said that he may have been a government official or whatever, but I'm telling you, he's just wanting money. He's wanting a church here or whatever. He's wanting that kind of connection. And so, yeah, right, I'll believe it when I see it. I wasn't just hopping on the bus. And then the week before Christmas, Sam called me, and he said, Pastor, here's the deal. Not only have these government officials come through and they're providing a location, they're going to be advertising, but they are also themselves putting up $12,000 towards hosting this event. They want us to know that they're serious about us doing this in their city. He said the pastors have all agreed together that they are going to prayerfully raise around $6,000 to help with the event as well. And I'm like, okay, forgive my doubting. What do you need from me? And Sam said, well, Pastor, actually, we need you. He said, we can do it, but it is going to be, just a pretty heavy workload, because they're going to be there. They're going to be there in total for around 3 weeks or so, visiting villages, hosting a couple of pastor conferences, and then all getting ready for this main event in Uvira. And at that point, I told him I would pray about it. I would talk to our leadership here at the church, and our leadership here at the church, actually, I love these men. They're awesome guys, and they totally surprised me. They almost immediately came back and said, "We believe God is in this. He's opening the door for this, and it is the right time. You need to go." And my wife was the same way. She was like, "Look, God has already opened up some pretty extraordinary doors, and if if the government is actually putting up money, this is the real deal." And so that is what this upcoming trip for me really is. Sam and Justin actually left this morning for the first leg of the trip, and they're going to be in some different areas, including a couple of villages that don't have electricity, which is a new territory for us. And then I will be meeting up with them. I leave March 9th. I'll be meeting up with them March 11th or 12th, I believe. I'll be preaching that Sunday in a church. And then we have both this main event in Uvira as well as another pastor's conference that I'm going to be. I'm actually going to spend a week. My sessions with the men are all going to be about marriage, and what does the Bible tell us about marriage, and how can we be better husbands and wives according to Scripture, and all of that. So that's the trip that's ahead of us right now, and I'm excited. Wife's excited. The church family, I think, is excited. My kids, I think they support it, but I have to tell you, my 7-year-old came to me the other day and said, "Daddy, where did you say you're going on vacation? Why can't we go with you this time?" Like, dude, it's not vacation. But yeah, that's what's ahead of us on this trip. We'll still be feeding some orphans. We're still going to be doing some specialized things for some of the hurting women, and then but the heavy emphasis again is on training these pastors. The big event in Uvira is we're going to talk about reconciliation and the gospel, and in it all we have probably the most important thing for this ministry, especially these next few weeks. I keep going. I've been going back to this from the very, very beginning. No matter what else we do, I want to hand out Bibles. That first time I was there, and we were only handing out 50 Bibles in each village because we wanted to be able to get some Bibles into every village. And I got to be honest, I hated it. I hated only having 50 Bibles and having to tell some people no. It was heartbreaking. But this time, and I don't even know how many Bibles we have. What I do know is when we announced that we were going back in March, I know that there was at least one person who stepped up and said, I will give a matching gift of $5,000 just for Bibles. If you can get people to give up to $5,000, I'll match it with another $5,000 to double the Bibles. And we met that. And I believe there's still funds that are coming in to help us get Bibles so we can get them into the hands of the people there. And because I'm just of the mindset that if we can leave Bibles in their hands, then we've given them something that can last. They might not be educated real well in some instances, but as they learn to read, if they've got the Word of God, God can do great things. And so as far as I'm concerned, they can forget my name, they can forget my face. It is absolutely not about me or our team or even South County Bible Church. It is just about getting God's Word into their hands and hopefully God's Son into their hearts. So.
Absolutely. The thing that struck the biggest chord with me has always been the lack of Bibles, and the lack of access to our greatest weapon in the fight against evil and all that jazz. The ability for us to take knowledge and apply it. That we have a whole library at our fingertips.
Right.
And that's denied them, and it's keeping them in darkness. Really struck with me, which is why I wanted to do this live stream, and and I've been posting the GoFundMe tastefully, which will go for things like as I understand it, things like the Bibles and goods and things that you need to help these men, and everyone else that you can reach out to. because it's just a solid net good in a place that's you know, still in
Yeah.
turmoil from things that happened 150 plus years ago, um,
Yeah.
which was, you know, misery and all that jazz.
Right.
Worst possible
Right.
thing. Um, and it, you know, it's always good to hear about perspective outside there. I guess you're heading out soonish for it, and you'll be gone for most of a month, isn't it?
I will be gone for around 2 weeks. I leave on the 9th and I come back the 24th. Uh, Sam and Justin left today, and they'll be coming back. We'll be coming back together on the 24th. So yeah, they'll be gone most of the month. I'll be gone for a couple of weeks, or a little over a couple of weeks. So, but yeah, you know, that you talk about. You mentioned that about the things that have happened in the past. The reality is there's a whole lot of these areas that are rural that they don't have anything. There is no 911.
Mm-hmm.
So the lawlessness and these sort of raiding bands and you know, kind of rogue gangs. I mean, we would think of them as kind of gangs, but they're just all over the countryside, and there are areas that become hot spots even now. And we've been careful to try and not get too far into the interior where some of that occurs. And a lot of the spots that have kind of flared up have generally been at least 10 or 12-hour travel in Congo from where we have been located. I do know that Sam and Justin on their last trip were in a little bit more of a sketchy area, and there was a group. You know, the darkness. You're talking about the darkness and just the enemies working through that darkness. There, it is really something else. But this last time when they were there was some event that occurred during the trip where they were, you know, on the outside looking in, you would probably say they were attacked. Our team was attacked. It wasn't devastating, and the outcome was good. God was protecting our men. But the reality was there were soldiers, or what appeared to be kind of soldier dressed type guys that were trying to steal the van or drive it off the edge of a kind of a cliff and all of this. And one of the men in the process was wounded. He cut his leg on something or whatever. And when Sam saw it, he pleaded with them to let him help. And he had some medical supplies in his bag and got out and basically doctored the man. And as Sam was doing this, here was this, you know, I don't like using the racial terminology, but here was this white guy from America who's down on his knees in the dirt, taking care of this man who was just, in essence, trying to figure out what they could steal from our group. And all of a sudden, God was just in it, and everything calmed down, and nothing else bad happened. And so, even in what would have probably been kind of the bad situation that we've had it all happen, God still was in it and worked out some neat things. So that's what we're praying for. God, that God will just do what He wants to do and how He wants to do it, and He will glorify His name through our efforts. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So.
Yep.
But I tell you, so one of the villages I was in the last time I was there, I was addressing the crowd, and I said, I told them, I said, I am going to pray that God would work in your hearts and lives, and that someday He might even call some of these children into ministry or into the mission field. And the translator told the people of the village that I said, we're sending a missionary to live in their village.
Oh, no.
And the whole crowd erupted. It was just, they were cheers and dancing. And I looked down and I said, what did you say? And he told me, and I said, no. And so we got it straightened out. And at first there were a few people that were really disappointed, but it was almost like even that miscommunication stopped things in a good way, and the people kind of turned around. They're like, "Wow, this is you mean God could work in my life and use me?" And that's, of course He can. He's God. So but it's just funny. They immediately erupt into dancing and shouting, and I'm thinking, they all want to go into the ministry? But that's not what was communicated. So we got it straightened out. It was all good.
Yeah.
So,
well, the more power that they have to handle these things, the better off they are. Because I remember a story. I cannot remember for the life of me who told it, but it was a doctor who went out to a dark part of Africa because he was an African American himself, and he or was he a white guy? I can't remember, but he had some sort of connection there, and he comes, he gives them a whole bunch of medicine, whole bunch of equipment, and they go through these things, and he leaves as his visa was up, and he comes back some a year later, and he sees that they're back to using the witch doctor medicine, even though they still had many of his pieces of equipment, machines, first aid kits, and so on. And he said, "What happened?" "Well, when you left, the medicine stopped working, and the witch doctors became powerful again." And it's kind of like watching territory give and take, where we need to establish, churches. You need to train these men, give them the Bibles, so that more islands and territories of light can just spread out across Africa. And, then the powers of the witch doctors are not so strong, and not so much fear over the people, and the demons can no longer just, I've heard stories I don't dare tell or repeat, and it's the more that these things happen, the better off they become.
yeah, yep. Well, the one of the conversations I felt like I was having repeatedly with some of the pastors that we were working with while I was there had basically they were we would talk about stuff. I'd show them something in the scriptures, and somebody said, "So let me ask you a question. When the New Testament says, pray and the mountain will move, is that a literal mountain, or is that just whatever troubles I'm facing, whatever my problems are, I can pray and God will move those mountains?" And so we talked about the fact that when you're reading your Bible and you read about a mountain or you read about something, I said your first thought should be literal. And in this case, the text you're referring to isn't it's explained in the passage. So look for the explanation. Don't just give it your own. But that led to another conversation where, and I think this was directly related to some of the witch doctor influence, or the ones trying to undermine the truth. They said, but these men come and they tell us they have a new word from God, that God is speaking to them, and this goes back to the dreams and this other stuff. And they said God is showing them things, and we have to listen to them. And I pressed upon them. I said, that's why you need your Bible, because the Bible has it's very clear. If someone comes claiming to speak for God and it doesn't line up with what God has already written down, they're lying. They're dishonest, and they said, but they talk about prophecies, and they're prophesying, and they're talking about things that come in the future. And I finally said, okay, now let me just say, this would have been in late September that we were there, and I said, okay, I'm going to prophesy. I am going to tell you about something in the future that is coming. You can take it to the bank, and then you can believe that I'm from God. And their eyes got great big, and they're kind of looking at each other and mumbling, and they're looking at me, waiting to hear what I have to say. And I said, I just have this feeling that within the next 60 days, it is really going to rain. Well, the rainy season was about to begin. And so they all started laughing. And I'm like, I said, do you understand? There are people that are really good at pretending to predict the future by telling you things that are very likely going to be happening, but they're just trying to deceive you. And it is okay to question and to be concerned, and it is right for you to compare what they say to what the Word of God says. And where they disagree with the Word of God, you reject what they say and you stay with the Word of God. And about half of the crowd of pastors, and that group that I was addressing is actually in one of the pictures in your slides that I sent you. But half of that group immediately began to applaud, and the other half started whispering. And my translator looked at me and he said, "Can you tell which ones believe the Bible is God's Word?" So I kind of felt like we were addressing some of the ones who have that tendency towards the old school witch doctor mindset kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But that event, I mean, we were actually expecting around 60 to 70 pastors and their wives in total. And I think we had close to 150 show up. They hear about it, or they're interested in ministry things, or they know the guy in the next village is going, and they come and they just arrive, and they want to be a part of it. They want to hear, and then our guys on the ground kind of go through a vetting process to see who's who and whatever that way. But I tell them, I don't turn anybody away. If we can help it, do not turn them away. This may be the one chance they get to hear a little bit of challenge and a strong emphasis on the Bible's authority. And actually that whole time led to they wouldn't leave. I mean, we were pretty much done with our stuff, and they didn't want to leave. They didn't want us to leave, and they're like, "Can you please give us an example? How you say we're supposed to read the Bible? What do you mean by that?" And so I actually grabbed a Bible and did this sort of mini crash course with them on basic Bible reading and interpretation using the book of Titus. And it was very simplistic. It was Paul writing to Titus on the island of Crete, and I'm addressing the leaders. I'm telling you about the problems. I'm telling you about my expectations. And as I'm kind of walking them through this basic thing, they were just writing down stuff as fast as they could possibly write it down. And for some of them, you could tell their eyes were just really being opened. Oh, the Bible does tell us who wrote it and when they wrote it and who they wrote it to and what they're talking about. And again, it's not a random thing that you just decide what you want it to say. It has a message, and it's important to get that message, which is the very thing. I mean, think about it. That's the very thing the enemy has attacked from the beginning of time. When Satan was in the garden and he approached Eve, what he said was, "Did God really say that?" The attack has always been against God's word. Mm-hmm. And so getting Bibles into their hands is priority number one. Getting at least a minimal amount of training to help them to let the Bible speak for itself, to think of the Bible as God's word and God's own words. That feels like, if you'll forgive me the old illustration, that feels like we're teaching them to fish instead of just giving them a fish. So, is my 10 minutes up yet?
Oh, it'll go as long as you need it to. You're our guest, and you're telling us some stuff that's really important. And I honestly don't know when my audience will ever hear something like this, before or after, except in what little anecdotes I know. It's funny you mentioned that, people, attack the Bible, from the, did God really say that? From the beginning, because that's literally what this guy on this video I have for, entertainment afterwards. says. It's like, is the science really saying that? Is the mustard seed really the smallest seed ever?
Right,
All
right,
this
right,
other
right.
stuff, and we have people saying they enjoy it. Mega Buster Shepherd, Bradford Walker, our regulars, hey hey,
Yeah,
are listening in, and this thing will get 30 or something views before next week, maybe a few
sure.
donations, which would be great, because it's yeah, it's important for people to know what goes on in the world, and more than just oh, this governor took over here, or they were bombing Assad's troops again for no reason, or a made up reason. Um, Even though that guy has had less power than the Libyan governor, but leader, but he's held on more tenaciously than him. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
what goes on. The work of Christ is, that Bibles are being distributed and witch doctory is being rebuked. Praise the Lord. Um,
yeah,
the war in Syria forced Assad to protect Christians under him, or else he wouldn't have a base. And so the church is not flourishing, but it's strengthening itself. And I've been hearing good things coming out of there, even in a time of war. Um, People are returning to Christianity throughout Europe. Because they realize that they can no longer live godless, rootless, modernist lives, even as
yeah,
their own bishops say, "Oh, we will turn off the cathedral if you have a demonstration, being pro-German and pro, Christian." This is not what we do these
mhm,
days. They lit up the cathedral with their cell phone lights, to say that their lights cannot be extinguished by it. And
yeah.
of course, you are going, as I mentioned, rebuking witch doctory and distributing Bibles and bringing alms to the poor, and all these other things. Megabuster Shepherd says Biden's bombing Christians. The evil that's being done uh, is 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 great, and it is evil, but there's much good being done.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what. Let me share with you one more quick little story, and then I'm probably going to have to run. Not probably. I'm going to have to bug out here. Um, but let me tell you one more little story, because the reality of this is we're talking about human beings' lives.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about people. It's all of the politics and all of the other stuff aside. At the end of the day, the people are people, and they have basic needs, and they have eternally significant spiritual needs. Those pictures that I gave you showed things like the tin roof, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the tin roofs that we're providing for some shelter for some of these homes. They showed us some of the goats that we've given out in some of the villages to try and help feed people. Um, there was a picture in there too, I think, of the inside of a home. I want people to see those shoes hanging on the wall and some clothes hanging on the wall. That's it. And that is a one room house. They cook, eat, sleep, everything in one room. Clothes, laundry, everything. Um, but the story I would leave you with, just to kind of remind your listeners of the humanity of this. We were at a school speaking last time I was there, and we went from the school back to kind of our base of operation, and we were in the city of Elvira at that time, and we were walking the streets, and one of our local guys was telling me of a little girl that was her literal name on her legal documentation, or we think of a birth certificate, in Swahili. Her legal name was the word unwanted. Just unwanted. That was her name, and of course she just took ridicule and everything from every direction. And when we got back, I shared that story. I shared about this little girl with our church family, and there was anonymous in a sense. I think I know who it is, but anonymous, a person, a member of our church who went through our Grace for the Heart of Africa to find this little girl named Unwanted and begin to support her very specifically. And in doing that, money was paid and the paperwork filed, and her name on her legal documentation was changed from Unwanted to Precious. And now that little girl is enrolled in school. She's going to school. She's receiving the aid that she needs to be able to just have the basic supplies that she has. And she is among some of the specific children that our team tries to work with and help. And so, you know what? We can't save all those kids. We can't do everything for all those kids. But we really do believe that we're making a difference. And who knows? Some of these kids are going to grow up, and God is, we believe, going to work in and through their lives. As Sam and Justin say all the time, we're not just praying for a little bit of light in a handful of villages. We're praying that Grace for the Heart of Africa will one day become a training center for missionaries going out to all of Africa, taking the light of the truth, taking Bibles way beyond this little area that we're working in with the folks that we're working in. And why not? Do we have a big God or not? I mean, are we seeking to do what he wants us to do according to his word? So we just kind of remind each other from time to time, pray big. We have a big God. And yeah, so we're excited to see what he's going to do with it. Even if it takes however long it takes. And even if we don't get to see the results here, we'll look forward to them one day in heaven. So, but hey, thanks so much for having me and letting me ramble. I hope I've given you some interesting things to think about, if nothing else. I'm gonna run. I've lingered a little longer than I intended, but that's okay. I appreciate you having me on.
It was excellent content and excellent stories. Well told. Thank you very much for joining us.
You bet. You guys take care. We'll talk to you a little later.
God bless.
Bye.
Mega Buster Shepard says he meant Bush, not Trump.
Fair.
Oh dear. See, I figured that you were just one of those guys who basically dislikes all American politics. And don't get me wrong, if you're consistent about that, I can appreciate such a point of view. But that makes a little bit more sense to me.
Yeah. It's yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's like Assad was at best blasé towards what was happening to Christians, but like as time goes on, it's like moved from, not to a protected class, but not nearly as oppressed as it was before. I was told once by a missionary from there that every general was his own thing. So if a general liked or just didn't care about Christians, life was pretty okay. But if you had an Islamist as a Muslim, as a general, he would be very oppressive. And those generals were the ones who sided with ISIS and lent their troops in war material. So it's one of those things that even if it was an evil action, it actually ended up benefiting the work of God because they're more free to do things now. So it's strange. What did you think of all this, Anthony?
Your pastor was a fascinating man who was doing excellent work. I literally had nothing to add. It wasn't, trust me, I was listening to the whole thing. He was very interesting. But I'm like, I got nothing to say to this.
I get you. Do you ever hear of this sort of thing happening in Catholic churches?
These sorts of like mission trips and things like that.
Yeah, just sort of like, do you
Uh,
ever hear about what the Delhi Catholic Church is up to or anything like that?
that is that is a thing. Like, don't get me wrong, mission trips and things like that, they are a thing in Catholic land. Yeah. I know that John C. Wright mentioned that his son went to El Salvador, I believe, on a mission trip for like Eagle Scout. I don't know. I say his son. I don't say the name because I can't remember which one of the Wright children it was, or I would name them. But
Mm-hmm.
whoever it was, they went to El Salvador on a mission trip. So this sort of thing does happen with Catholic churches, but with that said, uh, not at my church.
Hmm.
That we just don't really have it. It has nothing to do, I don't think, with desire or anything like that. We don't really have this. We don't really have the size. We don't really have the budget, and we're focused on doing different things. Uh, yeah. So what I will say is, I have heard of this thing happening, and I could even tell you a Catholic I know who went on a mission trip and has done this sort of thing in the Wright siblings, whichever one it was. But with that said, no, I don't know anyone personally.
Hmm. I'm always interested in this kind of thing because, I've always been kind of a small
Oh, it's a
church.
great thing. It's terrific.
Absolutely. Uh, it's I'm trying to think. With the oh my goodness, I could think because I've always been a small church Protestant type. We've always supported like missionaries who have been to like, you know, Nicaragua, Nicaragua, or Africa, a couple of
Right.
Asian places. It's been interesting. Like I'll be offering to uh, take stuff to any Vietnamese missionaries who need a care package or something because I
Now,
travel light.
I know Dr. So I will say this in terms of anecdotes about Catholic versus Protestant. You know Dr. Fesser, Edward Fesser, right?
Hmm.
I'm sure you do.
I've heard the name.
Uh, I've probably mentioned the name. So he's a Thomistic philosopher, and I could say without exaggeration that he's one of the people whose thought and writing just on his blog, not even his books, has been most influential on my life. He is
Hmm.
certainly I think one of the clearest writers today in terms of modern philosophy. But Dr. Fesser mentioned that once a Protestant like came out to him and was he when he was living, wherever he was living at the time, a Protestant came out and offered, his neighbor, and offered to help him out. And when he was there, like, he asked him if he believed in the Bible, and he offered to convert him. Now, the reason the story is so vague is because I only remember very vague details from it. It was in an article on his website, but the point of the story was that he's like, I politely declined, but I appreciated the offer, and it made me think that Catholics really, really need to be doing this sort of thing, because this was a man who obviously took, you know, heaven and hell seriously. He genuinely believed that people who were not Christians could go to hell. So he was coming out and offering to help me and giving me this opportunity because he knew it was just that important. And Catholics, in theory, believe the same thing. So why are we not doing this sort of thing more often? And I will say that I agree with that as a general point in terms of things that Protestants tend to do versus things that Catholics tend to do broadly, obviously.
Broadly.
Yeah, obviously it's broad, and also for that matter, just saying Protestant is a really, really it is really unspecific itself. If
Hmm.
I'm remembering what he said correctly, he was thinking like of Southern evangelicals, basically the Bible Belt. He was saying that. So I'm not an evangelical. I don't agree with a lot of the evangelical theology. I'm a Catholic, son of the church type thing. But I greatly respect the fact that, the Bible Belt tries to evangelize, right?
Right.
And that's something that Catholics do. I wish was some did more of. With that said, in terms of overseas trips, I genuinely don't know if there's any sort of percentage difference between how many are done by Catholics and how many are done by Protestants. There is a flip side to this too, in that Catholics have literal religious organizations that are dedicated to this sort of thing.
Yep.
So it's not. I think it might be an apples to oranges comparison in
Right.
some ways.
Well,
Uh,
yeah.
like there are like I said though, there are Catholic organizations that do this. Are there more? Are there less? I genuinely don't know. I have no clue. But I also know that there are like specific religious organizations, brothers and sisters, who like the purpose of the religious order is specifically we go to foreign countries and we try and spread the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Protestants, except for some of, I guess, the high church Protestants, like the Anglicans or even the Lutherans to an extent,
Yeah.
really can't have organizations like that. They look at the lay people in a little bit of a different way, blah, 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 blah. That whole thing.
Right.
So, I'm rambling right now. I'm just reflecting more or less on how Catholics and Protestants approach the whole issue. I'll give the Protestants, so that's the one thing I will give the Protestants a lot of credit on that, on the on that one issue of literal like door to door Bible thumping evangelization is something that I greatly respect Protestants that put themselves out there and do that.
Mm.
Because it shows a genuine, like, you take it seriously type thing that I think a lot of Catholics are lacking. They look at it from too much of an intellectual air, maybe, or possibly too culturally, as opposed to something that's living and breathing.
I gotcha.
As far as overseas missions, though, I think Catholics have their fair share as well.
Oh yeah, I know that Catholics do. I'm just curious about the perspective of it, because it's not something I hear about at all. Like most Protestant churches will have, like it's been kind of slow recently, just because there isn't as many as there were before, and well, COVID and stuff like that. But it used to be, I could depend on, some places having two or three, or they would send stuff back in, or there would be a video or something like that. Megabuster Shepherd says, I'll hand it to the Mormons, they do a lot of mission work. You see, but they have an institution that does the mission work and forces them to do it, otherwise they don't get into their heaven. Or maybe they'll get less wives or something, I don't know.
Well, to be fair, in one sense, though, isn't that kind of correct?
I mean, yeah.
Like the attitude.
Oh,
so,
it's correct.
The Mormons are one of those things. I do not respect Mormon theology at all. Sorry, any Mormon listeners, which I know we have. I don't mean to offend you, but I don't take Mormon theology seriously.
Fight us.
I just can't.
Fight us.
Yeah, I know that we do have Mormon listeners. Sorry to reveal that, but there you go. However, Mormon people as a whole, it's almost like you kind of wish that they were worse, because I find their theology so off kilter. But generally, like, what you just said, they go around and try and convert people and do mission work and whatever. I mean, that isn't a bad thing.
Right.
I guess it's a bad thing that's to Mormonism, but the general idea in terms of looking at it from a Christian perspective, it's like, maybe more churches should institutionalize it in that way.
Yep. So not only the Mormons, but the Jehovah's Witnesses too. They're a big one on it.
Yeah, the Jehovah's Witnesses, though, I think they are, but I think the Jehovah's Witnesses have a lot more. They're a lot stranger than the Mormons are, which is saying something, because the Mormons are quite weird. Sorry, Mormons.
I've never understood that holy underwear joke. there's occasionally a joke that comes up about Mormons who they have their holy underwear, and it's important. It keeps them from having sex or something. I don't know. It's weird. Their whole thing is
Fantastic.
very very strange. Um, but hey, it's all right. It's not the worst thing to get up to.
I know. I know I'm dunking on Mormons a little bit here, but I don't hate Mormons.
I mean, no, hatred is such a strong word for what we feel towards them. It's like there's like tiers of Christian heresy, and like the emotional response you should have towards it. Like the emotional response to say somebody kicking in your church's door and trying to whip the pastor out of his sermon, like that should be a strong negative emotion to whatever that guy's screaming about. I got one guy in my neighborhood who pretends he's Jesus and like walks around in pure white robes with a stick blessing people. Um, I think he got stabbed recently or something. I don't know. Like that's a pretty strong reaction. Then there's things like, you know, the horrid stuff you hear from charismatics and Joel Osteen prosperity gospel types, the Benny Hinns of the world, who have a strong presence in Africa. Because it feels like witch doctrine. It's easier than actually learning good doctrine, and oh my goodness, it's so weird. Like it's like I almost prefer the Mormonism to that, even though I really shouldn't, because it's further from the gospel. Um, but it's just so frustrating. Ugh. Oh well. Do you wanna dunk on an atheist, or you got something else or anything like that?
Do I have anything specific?
Yeah.
Nope.
Do you wanna beat on an atheist, or do you
I don't
just
know.
not
Any
feel it?
atheists in the comments section who wants to show up so that we can make fun of you?
We need to
No?
find
No
somebody.
one?
No, no. It was just so I was watching this YouTuber called Viced Rhino. About 60,000. I'm only trying to fill out the time for the next 45 minutes. Uh, or at least half an hour. A little bit of something, something. And he has this video, and it's called "The Bible Agrees. The Bible is inaccurate," and it's a good intentioned evangelical type who's like, well, the Bible is accurate in this way, that way. Well, the problem is that the Bible is accurate in theology. It is 100% accurate in theology in leading you to Christ. If only Jim Fear was here. I fear no man. I fear no atheist. And um, he starts nitpicking everything this guy is saying, and he's like, oh, it's accurate for science. Well, the mustard seed isn't even the smallest seed um, that the Israelites would know of. And it's like one of those feelings where it's like, do you not know what metaphorical language is? Apparently not.
Apparently not.
And it's like everyone keeps mentioning like the black orchid, but everything's from like Australia or Vietnam, and I don't know what they're talking about. Like I'm looking for it again, and it's weird. It's so weird. It's like they would have known about black orchids, and it's like I don't know what black orchid they're talking about. Like, is it the Philippine one? Like, are they traveling with
It's
them?
also an absolutely retarded argument, so
I
I don't
know,
care.
but it's like,
It
but
could be that point could be entirely true. It's like saying someone's as small as a mouse and then going, you know that they would have known about animals smaller than mice. and then you just look at them and go, "Who let the moron
Right.
in?" Just
Like
let,
it's almost
thank you, sir. That helped.
right. Congratulations. What is
That
Australia?
added a lot.
Surely it is where Satan fell to earth, right? And it's like, I don't like doing those videos where it's like, behold how accurate the Bible is, because you know that these are just bait for some smart, snarky atheist with a animal sidekick who's secretly a furry, except not just any furry, a special kind of furry. This one's a rhinoceros. Have you ever heard of a
The
rhinoceros
furriest.
furry? Right,
Not
and
just the furry, the furriest.
and they go on and on about, oh, the science says this, and it's just frustrating because you know or where's your proof? And it's not about that. Like it's like, okay, dude, I know that you haven't read all of the scientific data on it, and that if I asked you for proof, you just link me some sort of Vice article. And then,
Yep.
yeah, and then it's like, oh, but Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'd almost consider the witch doctors more honest. Ah, well.
I mean, yes.
I'm just trying to find out where they get this information about, like, the black orchid and how they know about it. I think it's BS.
I don't know. But it's one of those things. Going, like, do you go if someone says I'm as quiet as a mouse? Or are you just the guy who raise their hand and go, why did you say mouse? There are like 5 other animals I could think of that are even quieter than mice. Like, what even is? How does that add anything to a discussion?
Right. They're
Like, Israelites might have known about black orchids. Thank you.
right, and I
Thanks
can't
for
even find what orchid.
okay.
Right.
Like,
I think that
I don't care.
like he even brings up I think that grass has smaller seeds than mustard seeds. Okay, it's very cringy. It's like a little bit of
Hey,
poison. Hmm?
wow, that thing is so big. It's like as big as a house. Why did you say house when you could have said skyscraper? They are even larger than houses. I don't know if you noticed.
Right. Reject the furry, embrace the princess. Absolutely, Mega Buster Chapter. We must become ponies, pure, beautiful, with a stringent
And
caste system.
exactly.
As everyone knows, it goes alicorn, unicorn, Pegasus, and then Earth Pony. Mud Pony, as we
Hey,
like
know
to
what's a
say.
great show?
What's that?
Beastars.
Have you noticed how their social system makes no sense?
No, in what sense?
So, like, their
I'm
social
curious
structure.
to hear this.
Alright. Because we're in the random BSing part of the show. So, they barely have a social structure. So, you have, like, this weird sort of mix of, like, 2 columns, right? There's a herbivore column and the carnivore column. And, like, even though most of the leaders we've seen um, has been like carnivores, there's still some herbivores, but there isn't really any like power systems that you could play on that makes sense. Like, why would they be why would they be on top? Well, he's the supreme beast star. Okay, but like, why don't people just say we're tired of you murdering carnivores in the night?
Uh,
Uh,
I think now. Don't get me wrong. I don't have all of the context here because I'm not actually caught up on the show or the manga.
hmm,
But I think that's a little bit unfair as a criticism because
Mm-hmm.
I think that involves you. Like, I don't think you're supposed to know exactly how they got to that position, and it's supposed to be like you're supposed to wonder about this guy. Like, all right, so
Ah,
who is this person who got to this point? Who and as a herbivore, like what type of madman must they be? Like Lewis, for example.
right.
You know, Lewis is a herbivore who's now making it in the world of the carnivores due to the fact that he is driven and ruthless and exceptionally intelligent and ambitious. So I think you're just supposed to kind of think that same thing. Like you're not getting all of the details of the backstory. So when
Right.
you see a herbivore in that position, you're supposed to say, "Oh man, something is very weird here." Like
Mm-hmm.
or something, who is this madman? Like how did a herbivore make it to this position? Like you're not
Right.
I don't think you're supposed to think this is a normal situation. And without knowing, like if we do get the full backstory, and again, I don't know if we will or whatever, but if we get that full backstory and the full backstory doesn't make sense, well then, yeah, you'd have, then I guess there's a problem. But I, the reason that I would defend B-Stars on this too is because I think this is one of the biggest differences to me between it and the Brand New Animal, that the world of B-Stars is extremely well thought out, and that was actually probably my biggest problem with Brand New Animal. And it's also, by the way, Beastars is a great example of how to do political commentary in fiction correctly, because the political commentary in Beastars can be analogized to real world events in any number of ways. However, it's not, you can't make a direct one to one comparison because Beastars is not a direct one to one comparison with the real world. You can find parallels between the herbivore carnivore structure of the society of Beastars, but you can't find an exact one to one replica of it. So,
Right.
which makes it great for political commentary. All these relationships and things, you can find all sorts of analogies that you can make to things that are happening in the real world. But you're doing so knowing that ultimately it was designed for this specific fictional, universe and this specific fictional societal structure. If you're saying, so this is, fictional gay people, it doesn't really work.
Right.
Brand New Animal suffers with this big time. They try to draw, and it's what I call the X-Men problem, because X-Men is absolutely horrible about this. Where, if you think about it for more than like 30 seconds, the X the characters of X-Men, like the fact that they're persecuted against is utterly logical, and
Yeah.
you would be insane not to do it.
Right.
And this is true, like, if you think about it for, like, more than 30 seconds.
Yep.
Brand New Animal is exactly the same, The Beastmen are just human beings, except that apparently, if you group them all up together, they go feral and insane. And also, they could turn into animals on a whim and have
Right.
heightened senses and powers. So we're supposed to and how did they even end up getting persecuted for that matter? Like considering the fact that they could very easily go into the skies if they wanted to. They could very easily go underground. They clearly are they're as intelligent as humans, obviously. They can't get pushed around. It doesn't really work. And it doesn't work because they wanted to draw one-to-one comparisons with black people, let's face it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I say black because I'm American, and Japan just, generic minority, right?
Right.
Like, they want you to draw comparisons with a generic minority. This is where I think Beastar shines, though. Beastars, you can draw parallels, but ultimately I think that the creator did a lot of work making that society. Carnivores, herbivores, their relationship, how they interact with each other. It's not something that you'll find an exact parallel with in the real world, but at the same time, you could draw parallels and analogies on how people treat each other and how power hierarchies are created, you know, that make it useful and interesting to talk about without being in your face and obnoxious because they're not proselytizing to you. They're talking talking about the world of Beastars, not the world of our world, like Brand New Animal and X-Men are. Keeping in mind, too, that there are X-Men stories that I quite enjoy. I like Days of Future Past, I liked X-Men First Class, and there are, uh, and Brand New Animal I also quite enjoyed. I do, however, think that this is a major flaw at the heart of both of these stories. Megabuster Shepherd says the meta commentary of X-Men really makes no sense when Spider-Man and Thor are running around. Yeah, the other thing too is that X-Men is yet another example in a long line of things that were subverted by progressives. The original X-Men had absolutely none of this stupid social justice commentary that the series somehow became famous for. The original X-Men was created because Stan Lee was tired of writing origin stories. And Magneto was evil because he was evil. And he was just a bad dude. Like, so it was yet another thing. It was one of the proto SJW stories, uh, and its subversion was inevitable. You know, its ultimate subversion into absolute nonsense was really inevitable after the SJWs took it over in the '60s and made people think that that's what X-Men always was. Just remember, though, that is one thing. If somebody tells you X-Men was always about social justice, they're either lying or, more likely, they are wrong. It was not always about social justice. It became popular before it became about social justice, and it was created for reasons that had nothing to do with social justice. But anyway, that is my rant. Now, on Beastars specifically, to be fair here, as far as what you have to tell me, you've read and watched more of it. Uh, you've read and watched more of it than I have.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, for all I know, I could be giving it too much credit. Megabuster Shepherd says Magneto is best when he has a giant armed nuclear space station or a hidden space fleet. I mean, isn't everybody best when that's the case? And
Absolutely.
Bradford Walker says, but Magneto was never a bad enough dude to save the president. I'm confused. I don't get what that means.
It's
What
just
am I
a
missing?
meme. It's just a meme.
Oh.
But like, I don't know. That one confuses me a bit too. But I know the meme. Are you a bad enough dude to save the president? I can't remember what game it was, but it was one of those early beat 'em ups.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Well, no kidding. Incidentally, by the way, this is why Captain America Civil War was actually a fantastic example of political commentary in a movie, because the Sokovia Accords do not have a one-to-one comp with any real-world political item in Captain America Civil War. However, they are they are philosophically broad enough that you could draw any number of parallels to any number of issues in the real world without actually making it, you know, without actually proselytizing to the viewer. So it allows you to have good people on both sides disagree, since there's no one-to-one to the Sokovia Accords, where SJWs, you know, it's very difficult for SJWs to write that sort of issue because you are always tempted to make the people who are not on the side that you'd agree with be evil. Captain America Civil War, though, did an exceptionally good job of this with their political commentary, which I've always been extremely impressed with it, especially that there are people I know who still debate the Sokovia Accords today, you know, and people who I have respect for, who I know happen to like fall on opposite sides of the agreement. I remember ER grumbling to himself that he would have liked Civil War more if Iron Man wasn't so wrong. And I remember Brian Niemeyer writing an article where he about the whole issue where he said he came out on the side of Iron Man at the end of it. So I just find it a really, really impressive piece of writing. Nice.
I mean, it is. I never really spent all that much time thinking about. Um, hmm. like, I never spent that much time thinking about Captain America, Civil War, partially because I liked it for the character drama, not so much for the Sokovia Accords. But it's like you've said earlier in this conversation, like oppressing mutants makes sense. Uh, the metaphor falls apart the second you realize that these people can casually and do often level a city block. I don't know whether I've said it on this stream, but I probably have. The only Batman story I want to see these days is a cop shooting the Joker in the back of the head until he's dead. Dead, dead. That's it. There's no other story in Batman that I want to hear told. Uh, it's like I've talked to other people about this. Why in the world would people move and live in Gotham? Well, there's all this money there. Like, it's more miserable and dangerous than St. Louis. And I live in the inner city. You know, it's it's like you could live in where the Flash is, or you could live in Metropolis, or you could live in who knows where. Where somebody who has super speed.
One thing that people don't talk about enough is that Batman's war on crime is a miserable failure, and he doesn't really do anything in any incarnation, even the good ones.
Yeah.
Like, even Batman the Animated Series, if you think about it, what does Batman really accomplish in those shows? Like, sure, he saves people in one-off missions, but in terms of his effect on the city, does he even have any? It doesn't look like it. Nobody seems to be scared off of crime. Like, it doesn't really seem to have changed anything at all, to be honest.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Megabuster Shepard says, I would love to see the cops finally take out the freaks. Would make an excellent storyline. Like, they do have a storyline where a single cop or, like, some quasi superhero goes crazy and tries to kill him. But the thing is, they're never going to kill the Joker. Like Azrael, or whatever his name is, the edgy Batman for the 1990s, is never going to chop off the Joker's head. He might kill some BS Z tier POS, but he's never going to attack, and beat, Joker.
Well, J.D. Cohen said it best. They've shot themselves in the foot with these stories. The Marvel, because Marvel and DC have no idea how to tell these stories or how a shared universe works. He gave a great example of, like, they don't really know how to handle their timeline, and that's why you get this BS like Batman never kills or Daredevil never kills or whatever. And don't get me wrong, every now and then you get some great stories built out of it. Daredevil season 3 I thought did a pretty good job exploring this whole idea. Batman has had good stories exploring this idea before, but ultimately it takes out so much teeth when you realize that there is an option that is just never going to be on the table in any realistic way.
Yep.
And the problem that they have stems from their whole approach to the timeline and their idea of canon and what is and isn't canon. They gave a great analogy with Lupin III in Japan. What time period does Lupin take place in? Does it take place in the 60s? Does it take place in the 70s, the 80s, the modern day? The answer is it depends on which one you're watching. But can you tell a full story with Lupin III? Like, can you end Lupin's story? Well, yes and no. The thing is, you don't need to end his story, but you can tell as many stories as you want to with Lupin, including versions of his story that end. And then you just tell a new story with those characters. And the old story already ended, so you're just using the characters in another story. And viewers aren't idiots. They know that this is a different story, right?
Right.
Like, there's no reason that DC couldn't tell a Batman story that ends with Batman being retired and having solved the problem, in Gotham or whatever, and then have another issue of Batman. Marvel even sort of tried to do this with a line called, like, Marvel End, where they showed the end of all the Marvel character storyline. And I think that's sort of a step in the right direction, but there's a flip side to this in that, once again, their problem is that they're trying to keep it in some sort of canon when you're working way too hard about that. Like, when was, somebody asked, when was Tony Stark shot? Right? Was Tony
Right.
Stark shot in the Vietnam War? Was he shot in the war in Afghanistan? Was he shot in the Korean War? I mean, what's the answer to this question? And the answer is, I don't know.
Like some people make the argument that the thing where it's like whatever the last conflict that mattered. What when was Uncle Ben shot? Oh, just a couple years ago. When did Gwen Stacy die or whatever? Oh, a couple years ago. Like that's
The
just the
thing is,
answer.
though, that we shouldn't be worrying about these questions.
Right.
So, you should worry about them to an example. Like Castle of Cagliostro is a great example. Castle of Cagliostro is a classic Lupin the Third story. Fans of the series theorize that Castle of Cagliostro must have taken place somewhere.
Castle of Cagliostro did what?
Right? They talk about their relationship, sort of. Yes,
Hold,
they
hold
talk
on.
about their relationship, sort of. In go ahead.
You got cut off. When did it take place?
Oh, what I'm saying is, so fans of Castle of Cagliostro will often theorize that Castle of Cagliostro took place later in Lupin's career. And they do this by pointing at some evidence from the movie. That's admittedly, him and Fujiko are on the outs in the movie. Fujiko talks about their relationship very much in a past tense way. Like, she's fine, she's over his BS type thing.
Right.
Uh, there's also the fact that Lupin talks about having gone to Cagliostro much earlier in his career. After
Mm-hmm.
their job, they talk about living on Easy Street, when Lupin never really seems like the sort of person who'd ever really consider retiring. And to be fair, he doesn't really in the movie either. But the very fact that he goes like, yeah, now we could live, we finally got that big score, when Lupin and the cast never really seemed to worry about, you know, getting the big score, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So all of these reasons they mention that like Cagliostro probably takes place later in Lupin's career. But here's the thing. The movie doesn't really worry about where it fits in the Lupin canon. It never really cared. And it was right not to do so, because viewers aren't stupid. They know that Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro, is its own movie, right? It has
Right.
a beginning, middle, and ending, and then the story ends. And you could tell Lupin stories that take place after it, and you could tell Lupin stories that take place before it, whenever it takes place. And
Mm-hmm.
sure, other stories might not fit in the timeline with Cagliostro, but who cares? Like, Cagliostro still makes sense on its own terms.
Yep.
Video games are another example of this. Fans have had a field day for a long time trying to figure out the timeline of the Pokemon world, when this is obviously nonsense. The Pokemon World timeline doesn't work because each player is doing different things in every game. Sure, they have general broad outlines, but if you really want to get technical here, you could choose a male or female player. You could choose different races for the player to be in later games. You know, you're clearly not in the same universe. The world doesn't really work as one timeline. Don't get
Mm-hmm.
me wrong, there is a broad timeline, but the idea is that, once again, viewers aren't stupid. How could there be a Pokemon Emerald and a Pokemon Ruby with two different storylines? Well, because they're even though they supposedly take place in the same time period after Generation 2. Well, because they're different games. Like, why are you even bothering with this? Why are you questioning it? And don't get me wrong, I understand the appeal to do it kind of for fun,
Right.
right? Like, I get that there's some fun in going, there's clearly a Pokemon multiverse. But it's when people start taking it seriously to the point where they start getting mad over inconsistencies in the timeline that it
Mm-hmm.
becomes a problem. And Game Freak, I think wisely, has just kind of opted to not really care that much about it, to try and fit things loosely into a general time and into a general place and time without really hyper focusing on it. That's something that American comics have badly gotten lost in, and we can blame SJWs for it, but we should also blame Stan Lee for it to an extent.
Right.
because the whole Marvel formula of putting things into an interconnected universe was originally an admittedly ingenious marketing gimmick that sort of blew out of control, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So, as a marketing gimmick where you can introduce characters in long running stories and then have characters from other stories show up, just casually drop in, it's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when you start you start expecting people to accept things that are obviously impossible that it becomes a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you could reference Cagliostro in Lupin the Third as a thing that happened in that universe and other Lupin the Third series, but you start getting lost in the weeds when you need to accept like that things that happened in the modern day and things that happened in the 60s all happened to a character who's still in his 40s or 30s. You know, you start losing that.
Yep.
Now, this has absolutely nothing to do with Christian Mission, but eh.
Yeah. It was it. The goal of it was more to talk about. Oh no. To talk about something, to fill out some time, but also to see what's going on here, and what's worth talking about. Because I'm interested in that stuff. Like there's more than there's more to talk about than I don't know. I'm having trouble thinking
See
about
that?
it because I'm playing a battle, and I really shouldn't while we're doing this, but I am. I'm sorry.
See, like, yeah, I I don't really take, fan theorizing. I think can be kind of fun. Like I like film theory. The thing
Mm-hmm.
is though that the reason that I like film theory is that the Matt Pat clearly doesn't take himself very seriously. The
Mm-hmm.
problem though, I think, is when people take Matt Pat seriously and Matt Pat is just fucking hated. Oh, I'm sorry. I gave up cursing for Lent. I lost the game. Anyway, uh Matt Pat is just hated. He's despised by so many people. Meanwhile, Matt Pat's putting out a video on why Count Chocula is actually inbred, and I'm like, see, that's funny.
Because he looks like a Habsburg, of
That's
course.
actually
Of course.
exactly.
It was
You
there all the
nailed
whole
it.
time. Oh well.
Anyway, uh, putting out a video on why he's inbred, and like people are going, "Oh man, I hate Matt Pat. I hate blah 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 blah." I mean, like maybe don't take him so seriously. The man just put out a video on why count on the man put on a video on why Captain Crunch murdered a man. I don't think you're supposed to, which he actually did, and it's pretty funny, by the way. Uh,
Right.
how Captain Crunch committed the crime of stolen valor and murdered a man.
Right. I
It's pretty funny.
I've never even thought about that, to be honest. But now it makes sense. It
Of
makes
course
perfect
not.
sense.
Nobody has. But he, but I'm entertained by it. Megabuster Separate says it's like trying to put together a Mario or Sonic timeline. What's the point?
Right.
Right. I mean, I can understand I can understand fans that do it idly because it's fun and they think it's funny. But when people
Mm-hmm.
start getting like mad about it, that's when you go r- roll the pump the brakes there, buddy.
Pump it.
It's not that big a deal, right?
Right.
Just isn't that big of a deal.
I mean, it's not.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. I mean, like apparently you care, but like no one else cares, and they
Hmm.
probably will never care. But hey.
I did see a video. So with the Pokemon timeline, I saw a video somebody came out with like why does Pokemon Yellow exist, and they just went into like all of the issues that Pokemon Yellow creates in the Pokemon timeline. When the truth is, and the dude in the video even admitted it, he's actually right about Yellow. So Pokemon Yellow, to be clear, that's like the Generation 1 game that I grew up with and I loved it. But Pokemon Yellow is such a scummy game. Like, the fact that it exists is so
Right.
scummy. So, it was created to tie in with the anime. The thing is, though, instead of creating a completely different game that was more anime centric, which admittedly could have been kind of cool, they just reskinned Pokemon Red and Blue with minor cosmetic changes, and then charged people full price for it. Which that's you're literally just taking advantage of children who want to see the Pikachu walk behind them, and it's actually like really toxic business practice. Buster Shepherd says, "Oh, I liked Yellow. It's my favorite. It's mine too. I loved Pokemon Yellow, but I can recognize that it's very toxic business practice. That they, at the very least, they should not have released the same game again full price. Like that isn't that a little? I mean, I know they already do that, and frankly, I already have kind of a problem with their whole dual release thing. But at least, most people are only going to get one unless you're like super hardcore, in which case there's no helping you.
Right. You're
But
done.
yeah, but Pokemon Yellow was specifically meant for people who watch the anime and then the kids would go, Mom, look, there's a Pikachu on it, and you get it for that reason, and then you realize you just bought the same game again.
But there's like 4 different Pokemon. Like, you can only get Nidoqueens in this one, and the other one you can get Nidokings.
Pikachu walks behind you. Admittedly, I love Pikachu walking behind you, and I love Yellow, but, but, come on. Like, come on, though. Really? There were other remakes that I think, were mostly justified at full price, like Pokemon Platinum, Pokemon Emerald. I know that there was a lot of criticism over Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, though, I actually thought did add a lot to the base game.
Mm-hmm.
And I already promised you this, and that's going to be a video that I make one day on why everybody is wrong and Pokemon Ultra Sun is one of the best games in the series. And if you don't think that, you're wrong. Wrong.
All right, old man Anthony.
Very
Okay.
Oh, wait. We've moved on to this, and semi-organically. I'm gonna bring it up, Ben.
Okay.
And you know what I'm gonna bring up too?
Don't bring up JoJo, please.
Not JoJo. No.
No, don't bring up
We're
Digigirl
talking
either.
about Pokemon.
Don't
No,
do it.
not him either.
Okay.
I mean, not him either, though. We might as well. We're saving.
We're not
that
gonna. We're saving
for,
it. Yeah.
for an announcement.
Yes.
Anyway, no, I'm bringing up Pokemon since we came there organically.
But we were already there.
We were, but I'm bringing up the new announcement.
Oh yeah, go for it.
The Pokemon Direct. You can't stop me now. I
wasn't
waited.
going
I was
to.
patient.
Leave me alone.
I know. I was patient, Ben.
You were.
I waited. I didn't force it.
You were. Good job. High fives, I guess. Yeah.
Digital high fives. Now let's all say, hey, did all of you see Pokemon Legends Arceus? Holy crap, I want that game. Pokemon Direct knocking it out of the park, giving us those faithful Diamond Pearl remakes and their new open world Breath of the Wild game set in Meiji era Japan. Not feudal era, Are
you still there?
Yeah, I got disconnected for a moment, but yeah, not feudal era Japan, Meiji era Japan. There's actually like a massive difference. Meiji era Japan's like the 1800s. Feudal era Japan is like the Middle Ages. For some reason, everybody called it feudal era. It said it was a game set in feudal era Japan, which isn't true. But whatever, who cares? Breath of the Wild Pokemon. You don't understand. I've been asking for this for like a decade. Before Breath of the Wild was a thing.
Okay,
Give me
Boomer.
an open world Pokemon, and they show you sneaking up on them and throw it, and it's set in Sinnoh. It's everything I ever wanted in a Pokemon game. Mega Buster Shepard says I want another evolution. I mean, sure.
It's allowed.
Sure. Oh yeah, the Diamond Pearl remakes don't look bad to me either. The art style I know is very divisive, but I think it looks fine.
Anthony, they're just
for
selling
me-
you the thing reskinned. This is exactly what we just talked about.
You're absolutely correct about this, but you know what? Here's the thing. If this was all they were selling, I think if this was all that they were releasing to people, I think they would have been received negatively. It's the fact that they're giving us this and the Meiji era Sinnoh game that's set in the same location but in the past that I think is making people kind of okay with it.
Okay.
Like they're going, okay, so this is for people who want to play the game as similar to, similar to the last games with the cute art style and whatever. And this is for people who were hoping for a real new story set in Sinnoh. So, yeah, I'll get both.
Mega Buster Shepard says Pokemon is a drug, but it's harmless except for your wallet. Your poor wallet. Your poor abused wallet, Anthony. Chained up to a radiator.
Much like anything else, there are people who get like way too into Pokemon. The Pokemon fandom is super toxic. In a lot of one of the more toxic ones, along with the My Hero Academia fandom, which is also extremely toxic. But with that said, I have a good time even with Sword and Shield, which were so heavily criticized. I had a good time with Sword and Shield. I am sure I will enjoy the Diamond Pearl remakes. I like the art style. I think the art looks fine. The only thing, honestly, the only real issue I had with it is I wish that they kept the overworld Pokemon. So starting with the Let's Go Pikachu Eevee games and with Gen 8, they started making it so that wild Pokemon were wandering around in the grass and you could see them before you met them. And I wish that they kept that mechanic, because it seems like they dropped that for the Diamond Pearl remakes, but that's a minor issue. It does look like they'll be bringing in Mega Evolutions, which is cool. There's hints being dropped that they're going to bring in Mega Evolution, which is nice.
Oh.
But more importantly, Mega Evolution was a fun mechanic. More importantly, we are getting our Meiji era Breath of the Wild Pokemon game, set in Sinnoh. Same region as Diamond and Pearl, set in Sinnoh. Mega Buster Shepard says, "Don't get involved with fandoms. They're just full of They're full of terrible people. Just enjoy the fan stuff as an observer." That is correct. That is correct. They are full of terrible people, and you shouldn't get involved with fandoms. I agree.
Oh my goodness.
They're awful. But with that said, yeah, Pokemon. You're right. I think that's a good way to put it. Pokemon's a drug, but they're a mostly harmless drug, except to your wallet. Obviously, like anything else, I know people who get way too into them and whatever, and they get really, really obsessed. And I am excited about it, and I will spend money on it. But at the same time, I know it's Pokemon. That's all it is. But I have a good time with the games. I will continue having a good time with the games. I don't care. I got no shame.
Can you imagine it? Having a good time with a game? Disgusting.
Right? Sword and Shield were so hated by people, and I finished the games. I have probably what, I want to say like 60 hours in them. I thoroughly enjoyed playing it. So that's why I see like they have the chibi art style, and I'm like, oh, that looks. I thought about it. I'm like, that looks nice. And everybody's like, what? Why did they make it look like that? And I'm like, it looks fine. I think it looks fine.
Now he has to be a
But once
contrarian.
again, but once again, that's also like at the same time, yeah, that's a thing. But who cares? Because Breath of the Wild Pokemon now exists, and it's a happy ending. All of the people who were going to be mad about it sort of were like, I think everybody was so prepared to like absolutely lose it
Yeah.
over the games, like they were really ready to, and then they announced like the Pokemon Legends Arceus, and everybody was just like, all right, actually that looks pretty good. like they said, okay, yeah, actually this game looks pretty good. I can't
Okay.
even be mad.
They're like, yeah, all right, we accept this. We're fine. We're not going to fight this anymore. All right.
And you still see, like, still see people who are trying to, I don't know, be negative about it, but it's a lot harder, you know, because they're like, if you don't like those games, like, look, we gave you the Sinnoh games that are exactly what you were asking for. Well, the graphics don't look great, and then they're like, dude, okay, boomer.
It's a thing
That
of beauty.
frame rate chug. Yeah, Mega Buster Shepherd says that frame rate chug, though, I'll admit. Yeah, the frame rate was a little low, but first we're a year out, and more importantly, to be honest with you, I was thinking to myself, if I were playing a game that looked like this, would I enjoy it? And the answer was yes. So I'm just like, conclusion, yeah, I'm happy. I thought it looked really cool. I would have enjoyed it. I wish the frame rate was a little bit better, I guess. But honestly, I only noticed it after people pointed out to me, which is a good sign. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really less about the technical details of it and more about the fact that they're giving me the game that I was asking for. Like, even if it's not, the best running or best looking game, it's the game that I wanted them to make, so I will enjoy it. Diamond Pearl remakes are what they are. If you like the art style, you'll like it. If you don't, you don't. I think they look fine. I'll get them, and I'll have a fun time with it.
Look at him enjoying things.
It's like it's the meme, with, the XKCD comic with them playing Rock Band. He goes, that doesn't make you a real band. Didn't you hear me? Stop having fun. Just gonna be a guy in the background going, they're cheap, I think I posted the meme. It goes, their chibi heads are way too big for their bodies. I don't know why you get this. Platinum looks better. Stop having fun. And that'll be me playing the game while there's just some guy in the background saying that.
No, he's having fun. Stop.
Anyway, anything to add, Ben? I know you literally couldn't care less about this, so I appreciate you letting me go on.
I do not, I'll admit, but the main thing is more about just letting you talk and chat and stuff like that, and make it to 8 o'clock, which we have. Ha 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 ha. Which was my plan all along. You were
Perfect.
all bamboozled by my thing. I lost interest already. All right. In which case, do you have anything else for us, Anthony? You good?
When the next Pokemon game comes out, I want to live speak it.
Stream
I want
it.
to live stream it.
I will arrange it for you. I will arrange. I will arrange it for you. Actually, I'm kind of hoping that
it'll be months from now, so we're not anywhere close to it. But
that's fine. I'm hoping actually that like when Vox starts live streaming, I can jump in and be the first VTuber on unauthorized. I want that distinction. I want
Yes.
it, Anthony. It's inherently evil. It is chaotic. It is like chaotic evil with like a top hat on. Like it is a platonic ideal of chaotic evil, and I want it. Anyway, uh, if only we could get a Warhammer TRPG not done by this War WFRPG 1 or 2E or bust. That's a lot of letters, and I don't understand it. But thank you all for joining us. Thank you for listening to The Thing with the Pastor. Thank you for Bradford Walker for sharing the GoFundMe. It does go to a good service, and I do see, a lot of the stuff that goes on here, and the more that's done, the more that's helped out, the better. We are missionaries to the world around us, and we should never forget that. Have a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I really